Welcome to Zambition, the channel on which we engage in dialogue with leaders from across sectors and generations. For Zambition, the term leader does not only refer to those in high-ranking positions. It includes everyone who is seeking to make a difference in society. Greetings. My name is Martin Kalungbanda, your host on Zambition. Today, I am extremely excited about our guest. He's a young man I have known for more than 6 years now. I am inspired by his brilliance. I am inspired by his beliefs and values. His name is Brighton Kaoma. He's a young Zambian social entrepreneur, an activist who has just graduated from the University of Columbia with a master's degree in public administration. Believe it or not, at the age of 14, he got frustrated with the lack of action by us, the adults, with regard to climate change. And at that early age, he found a way to begin a radio program which attracted a weekly listenership of 2 million people. Brighton is also co-founder of Impact Hub Lusaka, one of the emerging innovation spaces in our country. Brighton, welcome to Zambition.
Thank you so much, Martin. I am very happy to join you today, and I look forward to this dialogue.
I would like us to begin our dialogue with you sharing an object or image that best describes the journey you have walked this far.
In my case, there's something that I hold in very high regard, and this object and instrument has guided my direction. It has helped me make decisions, but it also inspires a renewed sense of hope and enthusiasm, especially in moments where I feel low, in moments where I feel hopeless, and in moments where I want to look to upper inspiration. And to me, it's the rosary, specifically the cross, which to me is symbolic of the triumphs, the sacrifices, and the love that Jesus Christ showed to us and continues to show to us. And it reminds me that my purpose in life is to show service above self, to love others, even those that persecute us, but to also show perseverance and determination in times of struggle and challenges. So the cross has continued to be a huge sense of direction for me. It restores a lot of hope and confidence, and it's always provided me with a sense of direction and purpose.
I must admit, I never saw that coming. You picking the rosary as the kind of symbol that best describes who you are and the journey you have walked. How did you come to have such a relationship with the rosary?
That's another very important question. And I will take you back 27 years ago when I was born in a small mining township of Ipusukilo on the Copperbelt province of Zambia. Growing up in an environment where my parents were looking after my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, my cousins, my sisters, and my brothers. We lived in this communal environment where On a weekly basis, I would go to school Monday through Friday. On a Saturday, we would go to our little farm across the Kefir River. And in those moments, we would always hop on like small canoes across the Kefir River. And from time to time, we would meet other people that were living that same kind of lifestyle of household subsistence farming. So my parents gave us that culture of growing what we could eat. And the process of understanding what it means to sow seeds, allow them to germinate, take care of them, weed away all the weeds, apply the necessary nutrition in order for the crops to grow, instilled a greater sense of patience because I was able to see everything that was happening through that process. On Sundays, my parents would always wake us up early in the morning at 5, would get ready, would fetch water. We had a shallow well at our house, would make sure that our garden has been watered properly, and then would get ready to go to church. So I was going to the nearest Catholic parish called St. Peter's Parish. And as a young altar boy, my passion for saving the church allowed me to equally demonstrate leadership in other capacities within the church. From joining different clubs, I ended up now demonstrating that irrespective of how young you are, you can take responsibility of your life and you can have something that you firmly believe in. And for me, believing in my faith as a Christian and abiding by the principles of the church provided a greater sense of direction. And the rosary to me has provided that opportunity to lead a life of purpose.
Brighton, at the age of 14, as I said, when I was introducing you, you ended up starting a radio program. What led you to that?
When growing up in a community, Martin, even as a child, you have that intuition that naturally tells you that something is wrong. And if something is right, you also have that natural intuition that tells you that something is right. Even in a household, when things are not well as a child, you can pick up particular, experiences and you can get a sense of what's going on. So when I was about 14, I realized that there were days when I would walk to school and I would always walk about 30, 40 minutes to my nearest school. But there were times in the rainy season where I would discover that halfway on my journey to school, the bridge that connects my school and my house is washed away by floods. And there were days, as somebody who was raised in a family where we would always grow our own crops, would experience unforeseen levels of drought. But I could also see that particular genders like girls were forced an extra mile to draw water, and that was taking away from the time they could be in school. So I was seeing certain things not working properly. So I realized that there are challenges with our climate. Things are changing. I would engage in conversations with my parents who were born in the 50s, and they would talk about how way back things are not the way they are now. They would speak about how the onset of the rains would be around November. They would be getting ready to sow the seeds. They would collect seeds, which they had preserved from the previous farming season. They would speak about how there was plenty of water. They would speak about how the environment was so pristine and ideal, both for farming, but also for them to thrive as a working couple. So when I listened to all those stories and I engaged in intergenerational conversations with my grandmother, who was born in the 30s, with my parents who were born in the 50s, with my sisters who were born in the 80s, and myself born in the 90s, I realized that there were so many things that had changed over the years. And nobody in the community was willing to step up and begin addressing all these changes we're seeing in our climate. So then I decided that, well, if before I go to school, I always check what time it is, and I would listen to the radio to wait for the announcer to say it's now 10 o'clock, and I would get ready to bath and go to school. Why can't I use the most inexpensive, accessible, and fun medium of communication, which is radio, to speak about the climate challenges that my community was facing? So fast forward, I went to Radio Ichengelo. I spoke to the radio station manager about my intentions to start a radio program, and I was given free radio airtime to speak about the climate and to also speak about what the communities could do about the environmental problems that I identified.
What a beautiful story. And at the same time, I can now sense how your upbringing, through the way your parents sometimes produced some of the food that you consumed at home with the work of their hands. And I guess your own curiosity, then thinking, caring, worrying about the environment was almost natural to you. Now, Brighton, knowing a little bit about you, I'm aware that you have been in the presence of world leaders, queens and kings, among whom are President Barack Obama, the Queen of England, and most recently, you had audience on BBC with the current United Nations Secretary General. What is it that allows a young man or a young person, as you are, to be in the presence of all these people I'm talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thank you so much. I would, of course, among the reasons I'll give, add a greater degree of luck as one of the reasons. But I've been always very happy to share my authentic and genuine story. I tell my story unfiltered, and I tell my story the way it is, because that is what has made who I am today. It's the experiences that I had growing up in a community with no tarred roads. Not that we need to tell stories of poverty and challenges, but I've always told my story because it's genuine. It's what makes who I am as a Brighton. And if I filter my story and not tell it the way it is, then it takes away the abilities and opportunities of other young people to feel inspired, especially those coming from similar situations as myself. So over the years, I've told my story of growing up in an environment that was faced with so many complex social, economic, and political challenges, and refusing to settle for less. And this refusal to settle for less came as a result of my determination and belief that there's always a brighter future. If you put in the resilience, if you put in the determination, and if you put in the sacrifice, there's always a brighter tomorrow. So I've always worked in the community, started a small organization, got very active, used my time productively all the time because I realized that there was a brighter, better future for all, and that there are opportunities for young people to come out of the challenges that they are faced with. So I wanted to be that example in the community. I wanted to be an example in the country. And I wanted to be an example to young people that think they have to be determined by the environment in which they are born. So even the privileges that I ended up having of meeting world leaders came as a result of, number one, telling my authentic story. Number two, my interest to understand the science behind our changing climate and the ability to combine my story with the broader environmental challenges that we are faced with, but also the determination and courage to come up with recommendations that can help form public policies. So it's those three key characteristics that has given me the privilege to sit with world leaders, to sit with cabinet ministers like Angela Merkel, President Barack Obama, dialogue with Antonio Guterres. It's the ability to be able to share my authentic story and not feel ashamed to contribute to forming public policies at global levels.
You have so eloquently spoken about fundamental values that you hold as a person. Be and tell your authentic self. Don't be ashamed to tell your story. Do a fair share of your own work and preparation. And in the end, everything else unfolds by itself. I'm encouraged, and I hope other young people and we, the adults listening to this, feel encouraged by your philosophy and approach to life.
And you know, Martin, just to speak a little bit about my upbringing, I remember when I was growing up, I think I was in my first grade, because I was very little when I started first grade. So my sister, on the first day, took me to school. She walked with me for about 45 minutes. It was a very long walk. So she walked with me, and then when I knocked off from school, she never came to pick me up. So then I had to find my way back home for the first time. So in my early years of primary school, coming from the environment in which I was raised, most of the young people and children in my school were ashamed of publicly telling their friends where they lived. Because the school I went to, it was a public school. It was in one of the suburbs, better environment, better roads, electricity, and very good social services. So I remember in my first years of primary school, feeling ashamed and shy of openly speaking about where I was coming from. Until I advanced in my studies up to 7th grade, that's when I had the confidence and courage to say, hey, I come from this environment. And others would dispute to say, but why are you looking so clean and smart and still come from this environment? Because we only believe that it's only thugs and people that look a certain way come from this environment. So don't keep telling us lies, because we know that's not where you come from. That's what my friends would say. So I know what it means being a child coming from a community that others would describe as an impoverished shanty community, and the inability to have the confidence to openly tell your story in an authentic way. And I want to just inspire young people to believe that they don't have to be afraid and ashamed of who they are.
You refused to be defined by your environment. Thank you. Brighton, we will take a little break. And when we come back, I would like to know what your ambition is.
Are you an entrepreneur looking for a place to work from? Do you want to develop your leadership skills? Do you have an idea or business you'd want to scale? Are you looking for a place to host training and learning events? If you answered yes to any of the questions, then Impact Hub Lusaka is the place for you. It is a social innovation hub that is part of Impact Hub global network that supports various entrepreneurs and social innovators. Our services, among others, include co-working space, event hosting, incubation and acceleration programs, capacity building in leadership and business.
Welcome back. My guest today is Brighton Kaoma, scholar, climate activist, and social entrepreneur. Brighton, what is your ambition, your highest aspiration for our country, Zambia?
Thanks so much, Martin, for that question. And I think my ambition and my greatest hope for Zambia is seeing a country where every young person, irrespective of where they are born, the family in which they are born, the environment in which they are born, the religion in which they belong to, have access to a decent education, but also have access to an environment in which they can grow and thrive. I hope for a Zambia where public health, social justice, and economic growth are respected as being interdependent and not mutually exclusive. But all these things can only happen when we have political will. And at a time like now, where we are having the COVID-19 pandemic affecting economies, it's a political will that will be critical in realizing the Zambia that I envision. I think we have a huge opportunity to take advantage of the massive youth population that we have. When I look at countries like China, with 64% of 16 to 64 population demographic, and how they've managed to harness the opportunity that lies in young people by training them, giving them cutting edge skills in information technology, sending them to the best schools, providing a learning environment that gives them 21st century competencies, provide the results that we're able to see in China. And now they are slowly taking themselves out of poverty. And I think we have examples that exist for us to do that.
You underline focusing on young people, enabling them to access quality education. And you said all that requires political will. What does that mean? Pick the segment of education. What would political will look like going forward?
I think, Martin, political will going forward will look quite seamless. I think number one, it will take the form of not having the children of ministers accessing the best schools, the Ivy League schools that we see around the world. It will take every Zambian feeling comfortable and confident to take their children to public schools. I think we'll only be able to have the best quality education when everybody, irrespective of their standing in society economically, are able to consume the best public services. If the son of a minister and the son of a farmer in Shibuyengi or Mporokoso can feel comfortable to take their children to the same schools, I think that's when we will instill quality in our education. If that's non-existent, then the education that we aspire for is far-fetched.
That's an interesting perspective. And I remember a few years back when there was an education conference in Lusaka and I was invited to be one of the speakers at the conference. I challenged the ministers. Fortunately, the ministers of the time didn't have any children that were school going. But I said something like this: if you do take your children to private schools, when you are responsible for the primary, secondary school, and higher education sectors, then you don't fit to be ministers, at least of those sectors, because it doesn't work. If someone is minister for health and they are taking their family members to private clinics and hospitals, what does that say about their commitment to resolving the challenges that are facing most people? Maybe that's what is meant by political will.
Yeah, Martin, and I think that is cross-cutting. It applies to all different sectors. If everybody will feel comfortable to consume what our local farmers produce, if every person, irrespective of their social standing, are able to go to city markets or Chisokona market and consume what every ordinary Zambian consumes, I think that's when we'll be able to achieve the Zambia that we all envision, where every individual, irrespective of who they are in society, are able to access a decent living standard.
What are your thoughts around the notion of the youth are our future leaders?
That's a very interesting question, Martin. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a few young people when I was invited to speak to a group of 1,000 young social entrepreneurs in Singapore about 2 years ago. And we're discussing the belief that young people are the future leaders. And I must say it's a it's a widely held belief that young people are the future leaders when leadership is seen in the form of age. But if we were to strap off age as a measure for leadership, then I believe we have people in public institutions who are leading and are not supposed to be there, if age was not a factor. Because right now, when I look at the innovations, the inventions young people are building, these are things that 75-year-old heads of states and ministers have never built before. When I look at the ability and the creativity and innovation of young people happening in Shenzhen, in China, when I go to Silicon Valley and I see young people developing solutions to our greatest challenges of our time, then it reminds me that young people should be given an opportunity to lead. But also, development, just like anything like war, is based on numbers. So if the biggest demographic is not empowered, it can be a double-edged sword. It can bring destruction, or it can be a force for development. And I think that's one greatest challenge that I see my country, Zambia, not harnessing to the fullest potential. If we can take advantage of the 60% youth population that we have, give them the 21st century skills in creativity, skills in innovation, skills in problem solving, skills in emotional intelligence. If we're able to give them cutting edge skills in physics and computer science to develop applications that can be used to deliver COVID vaccines using drones from Lusaka to Northwestern Province, I believe transformation will happen. But we do have these ideas, but the ability for us to bring transformation. And to me, transformation is using public policies that we have and bringing the brightest and sharpest people to implement them. And that's when transformation happens. And young people are the vehicle that can bring that transformation, if we are serious about using them as an instrument for change.
Forgive me for my generalization, Brighton. Sometimes when I hear young people like yourself talk about how they can contribute, my ears hear, let's do the same things that young people in the Western world are doing. Is there something uniquely Zambian, African, that if the young people of our country, of our region, unraveled that, they might make a unique contribution to the future that we are aspiring for?
Absolutely, Martin. And I believe solutions that might work in Asia might not work in Africa. What might be more plausible in the United States might not work in Zambia or Malawi or Kenya. But there's something that unique about young people. And I think that unique aspect is the energy and the abilities for them to take advantage of their most productive age to do what's important for them and the countries in which they live. If government is the biggest employer and we have a burgeoning workforce and government cannot consume the current youth bulge that is in need of employment, then we need to start thinking about innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think entrepreneurship is that missing element that young people can take advantage of. I understand there are also challenges that come with that, no availability of a sizable amount of startup capital, and so many challenges that prevent young people from starting their own businesses and entrepreneurial ventures. But I think it's the energy and the creativity and the not give up ability that makes African youth unique. But also the plenty of natural resources that we have. We don't have to innovate like any other countries in the West that are decided to transform and industrialize unsustainably. I think we can use a different path right now. Let's think about beyond tourism solutions at a time where tourism now is being affected by travel restrictions? Are there solutions that are business modeled that we can use to solve the greatest economic challenges that we are faced with? Are there solutions that can enable us to leverage the plenty of natural resources that we have to our own advantage? It could be in the extractive industry. How can we mine our minerals in a more sustainable way? I think there are plenty of opportunities within the spectrum of entrepreneurship that young people can harness and take advantage of.
If indeed numbers work in your favor, doesn't that translate into a form of power that you can actually determine things? You can call the shots. Or is it because you would say the majority of young people don't have the privileges, for instance, you have heard of getting educated, and therefore they are constantly being manipulated by we, the older people, who have a little bit of resources, and therefore make, through divide and rule, the young people less powerful? Or there is another explanation, because if you have the numbers, power is on your side. Why are you not taking charge?
I think there's so many young people that are taking charge, Martin. When I look at my own country, Zambia, I see so many young people that have decided to take things into their own hands. I see young people that are starting their own businesses. I see young people that are taking that step to aspire for political positions in the upcoming elections, the 2021 August elections. I see young people that are deciding to start their own nonprofit organizations. I see young people that are really taking leadership by its horns. And to me, those are indications that young people are slowly realizing that they need to stand for themselves. But that notwithstanding, we've seen structures that have been created to stifle the power and abilities of young people to organize. But conversely, we are seeing young people organizing online and not using old approaches of being foot soldiers if they want to advocate for certain things that are not right socially and politically. So there are structures that have been created to prevent young people from permeating into certain key political decisions, because politics is equally critical. We can't rule out the fact that we have, political structures that give you a certain degree of authority and a certain degree of power, which young people do not have. But the numbers are there, and young people are proving that, we have the numbers. Social media is working. We are voting people out of power who are not working. We are advocating through social media to prevent things like cyberbullying. We are holding our leaders accountable by organizing in ways that never existed, say, 10, 20 years ago. So examples still exist, but we still see a persistence of structures in governments and organizations that still trample on young people's ability to be positive contributors to decision making.
What is the best piece of advice you have ever been given?
The greatest piece of advice that I've received in my life came from my mother. She told me, do not be afraid. And over the years, I've decided not to be afraid of expressing myself. I've decided not to be afraid of expressing how I feel. I've decided not to be afraid of expressing my authentic story of where I was raised. I've decided not to be afraid of expressing my faith and beliefs while respecting the beliefs of others. I've decided not to be afraid of any individual, irrespective of their class, economic standing, while respecting them. For me, not being afraid has guided most of my decisions. And that's the greatest advice I give to any young person. Do not be afraid of taking calculated risks. Do not be afraid of taking harder courses in high school or university. Do not be afraid of challenging educators in a respectful way. Do not be afraid of being different and unique, provided it's contributing to the well-being and welfare of others. And I hope every young person can decide not to be afraid.
It has been a pleasure learning from you, Brighton. I wish you even greater success in whatever you touch, in whatever you do. You are representing us all over the world extremely well. Wishing you all the best.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate it. It's been an incredible dialogue.
Thank you. Having listened to the dialogue and followed my conversation with our guest, I now invite you to look at the drawing that emerged out of that dialogue. Take time to see the contours, the colors, the images that are reflected on the painting, on the drawing. What thoughts, feelings, and images does this painting evoke in you with regard to the future of our country? What else does this painting make you think and feel? Kindly share your reflections on this channel so that we can continue the dialogue on the future of the country we all love, on the future of our nation.